Zuwena sat quietly on the edge of her bed, her fingers tracing the old fabric she had been stitching since morning. Her mind was full of dreams, dreams of colors, gowns, and a fashion world she had never seen but felt deeply inside her heart. She often imagined her name shining on billboards, women wearing her designs proudly. But in the small house she shared with her family, dreams like that were treated as foolish wishes. Her elder sister, Bizi, was the first to crush them. Bizi was confident, educated, and always reminded Zuwena of everything she lacked. Whenever Zuwena spoke about her love for design, Bizi laughed and said, "You can't even pass your exams. You fail at everything, Zuwena." Those words stayed with her like a wound that refused to heal. Zuwena tried her best to ignore them, but they echoed in her heart each time she picked up a needle. She remembered the day she showed Bizi her handmade dress, smiling with hope that her sister would be proud. Instead, Bizi looked at it with disdain and said, "Stop wasting your time. No one will ever wear that." It was in that moment Zuwena realized her sister didn't see her dreams the way she did. Her chest tightened, and she turned away to hide the tears burning in her eyes. Every insult pushed her deeper into silence. But inside that silence, something powerful began to grow: determination. Late at night, while the house was quiet, she stitched small pieces of cloth under a dim lamp. The sound of the needle became her escape from pain. Even though Bizi's voice still haunted her, Zuwena whispered to herself, "I'll prove her wrong. I'll make something beautiful from the same hands she called useless." She didn't know how or when it would happen, but she believed she was meant for more. The hurt her sister caused had turned into fire, a fire that made her stronger. Each thread she sewed carried a promise that one day she would rise beyond the label of failure. Though Bizi's words cut deep, Zuwena decided they wouldn't define her life. Instead, they would become the reason she kept moving forward, step by step, until her dream finally became her truth. Tears filled Zuwena's eyes as her sister's harsh words echoed through the room. "You'll never be anything," Bizi shouted, her voice cold and sharp. The pain was too heavy to hold inside anymore. Zuwena stood silently, her heart beating fast, her hands trembling beside her old sewing machine. She looked around the small room she had always called home, filled with memories of laughter that had now turned into constant fights. That night, something inside her broke, but in that same moment, something new began to rise: courage. Before dawn, Zuwena packed her worn-out clothes, a few coins she had saved, and her only treasure, the sewing machine her late mother had given her. The streets were quiet as she walked toward the old bus stop, her bag heavy but her spirit burning. The bus to Lagos was noisy and crowded, yet she barely noticed. Her mind was filled with fear and hope, tangled together. She didn't know where she would sleep or how she would survive, but one thing was certain: she would never go back until she had made something of herself. When she reached the city, the noise, lights, and rush overwhelmed her. She had imagined Lagos as a place of dreams, but it was full of struggle. Still, she smiled, telling herself, "This is where my story begins." She found a small room to rent at the back of an old building. The walls were cracked, and the window hardly opened, but it was her space, her new start. Every night, after working small cleaning jobs, she sat by her sewing machine, stitching pieces of fabric she found from the market's waste bins. Each design she created carried a piece of her heart. Sometimes she missed home and even her sister's voice, but she reminded herself why she left: to prove that she was not a failure. The city was cruel, but her dream gave her strength. Every stitch she made felt like a step closer to freedom. Zuwena had no fancy tools or money, but she had something more powerful: belief. And in that belief, she found light, even in her darkest nights. She didn't realize it yet, but the moment she left home with nothing but her sewing machine and hope, she had already begun to change her destiny. Zuwena's new life in Lagos was nothing like the dream she imagined. The city was loud, busy, and unforgiving. She shared a tiny room with two other girls who were also chasing their own dreams. The floor was hard, the air hot, and there was never enough space to move around. Every morning before sunrise, she left the room quietly, carrying her old handbag, and walking to the hotel where she worked as a cleaner. She scrubbed floors, wiped tables, and smiled politely at people who never even looked at her. Her back ached, her hands cracked, but she never complained. She kept reminding herself, this is only the beginning. When her shift ended, she would walk back through the crowded streets, tired but hopeful. In her little corner of the room, her sewing machine waited like an old friend. She lit a candle, its soft glow dancing across her tired face, and began to sew. With every stitch, she poured her heart into the fabric. The noise of the city faded, and all she could hear was the steady rhythm of the needle. Even when her fingers bled or her eyes burned from the smoke, she refused to stop. Sometimes her roommates would ask, "Why don't you rest, Zuwena?" She would smile and say, "Because my dream won't rest until I make it real." Each night she designed dresses from leftover fabric she collected from the market's trash. What others threw away, she turned into something beautiful. She believed that just like those scraps, her life too could be transformed into something valuable. There were days she had no money for food, and her stomach growled as she sewed, but the thought of her sister's words, "You're a failure," kept her moving. She wanted to prove that she could build something from nothing. Her tiny room became her workshop, her dreams her only company. When she finally lay down to sleep each night, she whispered a silent prayer, asking for one more day of strength. The struggle was real, but so was her determination. In the quiet of those candlelit nights, Zuwena wasn't just stitching fabric, she was stitching her future one thread at a time. One sunny afternoon, Zuwena sat near the market, stitching a torn dress she had promised to fix for a neighbor. Her sewing machine sat on an old wooden table, its sound mixing with the noise of traders shouting prices and children running around. She didn't have a shop, just a small corner near a fruit stall, but she worked as if she owned a big fashion house. People often stopped to watch her hands move swiftly across the fabric. Her designs were simple yet full of life, and even strangers admired her patience. Among the many eyes watching was Mama Decca, a warm-hearted woman who sold colorful fabrics nearby. For days, Mama Decca observed Zuwena. She noticed how the young girl worked with focus, even under the hot sun. One evening, when most traders were packing up, Mama Decca walked to her and said gently, "My daughter, you have a gift in your hands." Zuwena looked up, surprised. No one had ever said that to her before. Mama Decca continued, "You remind me of myself when I was young. I see fire in your eyes, and I want to help you." She pointed to a small empty stall beside hers and said, "Take it. No rent. Just promise me you'll keep sewing and never give up." Zuwena couldn't believe what she was hearing. Tears filled her eyes as she held the woman's hands tightly. That small act of kindness changed everything. The next morning, she moved her sewing machine into the stall and decorated it with bright fabrics and hand-drawn sketches. People began stopping by, curious about the young designer with the warm smile and colorful dresses. Soon, she started getting real customers. Women from the neighborhood came to order outfits for weddings, birthdays, and church. Every day, Zuwena thanked Mama Decca for giving her the chance she had prayed for. The market stall became her first real step toward her dream. She worked harder than ever, often sewing late into the night. The once struggling girl cleaning hotel floors was now an admired tailor in the market. Mama Decca's kindness reminded her that even in a harsh world, one good heart can change a life forever. Zuwena spent weeks preparing for the local culture festival. It was her first real chance to show her work beyond the market. She had no rich sponsors or famous models, but she had faith in her craft. Each dress she designed told a story. Bright Ankara patterns mixed with modern styles that reflected both tradition and courage. She worked late every night, her hands tired but her heart racing with excitement. On the day of the festival, she packed her creations carefully and carried them in a large bag, praying silently that someone important would notice her work. The festival ground was alive with music, drums, and laughter. Stalls were filled with food, jewelry, and handmade art. Zuwena set up her small space near the stage, hanging her dresses with care. People passed by, admiring the colors, whispering about how fresh and different they looked. When the models began walking down the runway, Zuwena stood at the back, nervous but proud. Her designs stood out, bold cuts, rich colors, and beautiful patterns that celebrated African beauty in a new way. The crowd clapped loudly, some even asking where they could buy her clothes. For the first time, she felt seen. Among the audience was a well-known TV host named Tola Abeni, known for discovering new talent. She couldn't take her eyes off Zuwena's collection. After the show, Tola walked straight to her stall and smiled. "Did you design all of this?" she asked. Zuwena nodded shyly, unsure what to say. Tola laughed warmly and said, "You're special. The world needs to see this." She invited Zuwena to appear on her television show to share her story and showcase her work. When the episode aired a few weeks later, everything changed. People from different cities called to order her designs. Her small stall became crowded every day. Local magazines wrote about her talent, calling her the young woman who brought new life to Ankara. Zuwena could hardly believe it. Her name was now known far beyond the market. She no longer felt like the girl who had left home in tears. She was becoming a symbol of hope. Her first breakthrough wasn't just success. It was proof that believing in yourself can turn even the smallest dream into something powerful. After her TV appearance, Zuwena's life changed faster than she ever imagined. Her phone never stopped ringing. Women from all over Nigeria wanted her designs, from brides to businesswomen. Some even traveled long distances just to meet the young designer who had become the talk of the city. Her small stall in the market could no longer handle the rush of customers. With the money she had saved, she rented a bigger space and painted the walls bright yellow, the color of hope. Above the door, she proudly placed a new sign, Zuwena Gold Threads. It was more than a name. It was her dream turned into reality. Every morning, she arrived early, ready to work. She hired 2 young girls from the neighborhood to help with cutting and stitching. Together, they worked joyfully, creating dresses that made women feel confident and beautiful. Her designs were bold yet full of meaning, combining African pride with modern elegance. The more people wore her clothes, the more her name spread. Fashion bloggers wrote about her, calling her the fresh face of African design. Newspapers featured her success story, telling how she rose from a cleaner to a celebrated designer. Then one afternoon, an unexpected email arrived. It was an invitation to Lagos Fashion Week, the biggest fashion event in the country. Zuwena stared at the screen in disbelief, tears filling her eyes. She had dreamed of this moment but never thought it would come so soon. She worked day and night, creating a collection that represented her journey, the pain, the strength, and the joy. When the day came, the crowd watched in awe as her models walked the runway wearing her signature designs. Cameras flashed, applause filled the room, and people whispered her name with admiration. By the end of the show, several stores offered to carry her line, and international buyers wanted to meet her. Zuwena stood backstage, overwhelmed but grateful. She thought of the little room she once sewed in by candlelight and smiled. Her hard work had turned into success beyond her imagination. The once broken girl had now become a name of inspiration. Zuwena Gold Threads wasn't just a brand anymore. It was a symbol of courage, faith, and the power of never giving up. Back in her hometown, Bizi's life was not as perfect as it once seemed. The company where she worked for years suddenly closed down, leaving her without a job. The friends who once surrounded her slowly disappeared, and the pride she carried so strongly began to fade. Each morning she sat by the window, staring at the dusty road, thinking about how her life had changed. For the first time, silence filled her house. The same silence she once used to remind her sister of failure. Now it was reminding her of her own mistakes. Days turned into weeks and money became tight. Bizi tried to find new work, but nothing worked out. The same people who once praised her now ignored her calls. One afternoon as she cleaned the kitchen, the old radio on the table started playing a program about successful young entrepreneurs. She listened absent-mindedly until she heard a name that froze her in place. Zuwena Adeyemi, founder of Zuwena Gold Threads. Her heart pounded as she heard the host describe her sister's achievements, how her designs were featured in Lagos Fashion Week, and how she was now inspiring women across Africa. Bizi dropped the plate she was holding. It shattered on the floor. Memories rushed back, every cruel word she had ever spoken, every time she laughed at Zuwena's dreams. Shame filled her eyes with tears. She sank into a chair whispering, "My little sister did it." For the first time, she realized how wrong she had been. The girl she once called useless had become everything she herself had wanted to be: strong, brave, and respected. In the days that followed, Bizi couldn't stop thinking about her sister. She began to replay their last argument, remembering Zuwena's face, the hurt in her eyes. Guilt ate at her. She wanted to reach out, but she didn't know if she deserved forgiveness. Every time she heard Zuwena's name on the news, her heart ached with both pride and pain. She had lost her job, her confidence, and the bond with her sister. Sitting alone in her quiet house, she whispered to herself, "She rose higher than I ever imagined." And for the first time, Beezy truly wished she had believed in her sister instead of breaking her spirit. Zuwena was sitting in her studio, surrounded by colorful fabrics and busy workers, when her phone rang. It was an unfamiliar number. When she answered, a calm voice said, "Congratulations, Miss Zuwena. You have been selected to receive the National Award for Young African Innovator." For a moment she couldn't speak. Her eyes filled with tears as her team cheered around her. She had dreamed of this kind of moment, but hearing it out loud felt unreal. The girl who once had nothing was now being recognized by the entire nation. That night, she sat quietly, thinking about her long journey, the pain, the struggles, and the people who had doubted her. While reading through the list of guests she could invite, one name stayed in her heart, Beezy. Her sister's voice from the past still echoed in her memory, the words that once broke her. But Zuwena was no longer the same girl who had left home in tears. She was stronger now, wiser, and full of compassion. She decided that her success would not be complete without forgiveness. So she picked up a golden invitation card, wrote her sister's name carefully, and attached a short note that read, "You once pushed me with your words, and I turned them into strength. Please come." A few days later, in her old town, Beezy received the letter. Her hands shook as she opened it. The moment she saw her sister's name printed on the elegant card, her eyes filled with tears. She couldn't believe that after everything, Zuwena still remembered her, and not with anger, but with kindness. For hours, Beezy sat quietly, holding the card close to her chest. It felt like a chance she didn't deserve but deeply needed. As the day of the ceremony approached, Zuwena felt a mix of excitement and nervousness. She wasn't just receiving an award, she was facing her past. The memory of her sister's hurtful words had once been her greatest pain, but now they reminded her of how far she had come. She smiled softly and whispered to herself, "I want her to see what faith can build." With grace and love in her heart, Zuwena sent out the final invitation, not just to an event, but to healing. The night of the ceremony was bright and full of excitement. The hall sparkled with golden lights, cameras flashed everywhere, and people dressed in their finest clothes filled the seats. Beezy stood near the entrance, her hands cold and trembling. She wore a simple dress, feeling small among the powerful guests. Her heart raced as she looked around, searching for her sister. Guilt pressed heavily on her chest. She remembered every cruel word she had once said to Zuwena, and now, standing among people who admired her sister, she felt the weight of her mistakes even more deeply. Then the lights dimmed slightly and the host announced, "Please welcome our Young African Innovator of the Year, Zuwena Adeyemi." The room erupted in applause. Beezy's eyes widened when she saw her sister walking gracefully to the stage. Zuwena glowed in a beautiful gown she had designed herself, gold and blue fabric shining under the lights like sunrise on the ocean. Her confidence filled the entire room. For a moment, Beezy forgot to breathe. This was the same sister she had once mocked, now walking with pride and elegance before the nation. When Zuwena reached the microphone, she paused and looked at the crowd. Her voice was calm but strong. "When I started my journey," she said, "many people laughed at my dream. Some told me I would never make it. But I want to say thank you, because those words gave me the fire to rise." The crowd went silent for a moment, then clapped loudly. Cameras flashed as Zuwena smiled, her eyes shining with emotion. Beezy couldn't hold back her tears. She clapped with everyone else, her heart breaking and healing at the same time. Watching her sister speak with such grace made her realize how wrong she had been to doubt her. Zuwena didn't use her success to boast. She used it to inspire. She spoke about hope, hard work, and forgiveness. The hall was filled with pride and emotion. As the applause grew louder, Beezy whispered softly to herself, "That's my sister." For the first time, her tears weren't from shame. They were from admiration and love. As the ceremony ended and the lights began to fade, people rushed to congratulate Zuwena. Cameras flashed, reporters surrounded her, and everyone wanted a picture with the young woman who had inspired a nation. But in the middle of all the noise, Zuwena noticed Beezy standing quietly near the back of the hall. Her sister's eyes were red from crying, her hands nervously gripping her purse. Without hesitation, Zuwena walked through the crowd and stopped right in front of her. For a few seconds, neither of them spoke. The air between them was filled with memories, pain, distance, and love that had never really disappeared. Then Beezy took a small step forward and wrapped her arms around her sister. Tears streamed down her face as she whispered softly, "You've become everything I wasn't brave enough to be." Her voice cracked with regret, and her body trembled as if years of pride and guilt were leaving her all at once. Zuwena held her tightly, her heart full of emotion. She had dreamed of success, but in that moment, this hug felt like the true reward: forgiveness, peace, and healing. Zuwena gently lifted Beezy's chin and smiled. "It's okay," she said in a calm voice. "What matters now is that we start again." There was no anger, no blame, only grace. That moment reminded everyone watching that true strength isn't in winning over others, but in forgiving them. The two sisters stood together, no longer separated by jealousy or pride, but united by love. Later that night, as they walked out hand in hand, the moonlight touched their faces softly. Beezy looked at her sister with pride and said, "You showed me that kindness can rebuild what pride destroyed." Zuwena smiled, her eyes shining with quiet joy. She had not only risen from the dust, but had lifted her sister with her. Their story had come full circle, from pain to forgiveness, from rejection to love. And as they stepped into the cool night air, both sisters knew that grace had won, proving that forgiveness shines brighter than revenge ever could. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more inspiring stories. See you in the next video.